My name is Catherine Leipzig, and I never thought the two people I trusted most would walk into my home together and destroy everything I'd built. But that night, when I saw them on my security camera, I knew I had a choice: fall apart quietly, or make sure they lost more than they ever took from me. What you're about to hear is exactly how I turned their perfect plan into their public humiliation. Tell me where you're watching from in the comments, hit that subscribe button, and let's begin. The courtroom clock ticked past 9:05, each second sharp as glass. Fluorescent lights hummed above. The air conditioning bit cold against my skin. Across the aisle, they sat together, my husband and my former best friend, looking like they'd already won. He wouldn't look at me. She made sure to. That smug, glittering defiance in her eyes, the diamond on her finger catching the light like a taunt. My phone buzzed once in my lap. A single word lit up the screen. Ready. From him. Her brother. The one they didn't know was on my side. I slid the phone back into my file. My breathing slowed. The judge wasn't in yet. Papers shuffled. The smell of polished wood and citrus cleaner hung in the air. Ordinary details you memorize when you're seconds away from changing everything. The side door opened. The judge walked in, small frame, hard eyes. Let's call the matter of Leipzig versus Leipzig and interested party. She didn't say my ex-best friend's name. She didn't need to. My attorney stood. Emergency motion for injunctive relief, Your Honor. We're seeking immediate enforcement of Clause 12C in the prenup, a temporary asset freeze, and permission to enter Exhibit K under seal. Their lawyer smiled like this was all beneath him. This is a marital spat dressed as litigation. Hurt feelings, not urgency. Hurt feelings. I almost laughed. That's the problem with men like him. Fraud becomes a misunderstanding. Theft becomes a misallocation. Betrayal becomes an overlap. The judge turned to me. Ms. Leipzig, why is this urgent? This isn't about feelings, I said. They breached the prenup the week they married. Infidelity and financial concealment. If the court doesn't act today, a property transfer at noon will put those funds out of reach. The judge's eyes flicked to my file. Your cooperating witness, Exhibit K, is present? Yes, Your Honor. The bailiff glanced to the back row. He was there, calm, clean-shaven, in the navy suit I'd told him to wear. He didn't look at me, or them, just forward. My husband noticed first, a tiny twitch in his jaw. She noticed next, shoulders snapping back, eyes narrowing, her fingers curling tight over her seat. Her lawyer blurted, "Objection! Surprise witness!" Counsel was served, my attorney cut in, sliding the proof across. The judge nodded to the bailiff. Bring him forward. He walked the aisle without hesitation. No eye contact with his sister. No glance at my husband. The clerk swore him in. State your name for the record. He did. Her face twitched at the sound of it. Relation to the interested party? She's my sister. And to the respondent? He used to be my friend. The judge caught the past tense. Proceed. Mr. Did you provide Ms. Leipzig with exhibits K1 through K7? My attorney asked. Yes. What are they? Screenshots of messages, bank transfers to a shell company my sister registered before their wedding, a recording of them planning the transfer to bypass the prenup, and a handwritten list of account numbers. Hers. The courtroom shifted. Chairs creaked. Even the judge's pen stilled. How did you get this? She left a spare phone at my place. It synced to the cloud. I copied the data when I realized what they were planning. The judge turned to me. Why noon? Because the transfer is scheduled then, from the shell to a trust in her maiden name. The prenup's clawback clause voids his equity and his claim to my company if triggered. My husband finally looked at me. I saw it land. Not the loss of money, but leverage. My former best friend leaned forward, voice low and venomous. You're pathetic. The judge snapped her head toward her. You will remain silent unless addressed. Her brother didn't look at her. My attorney slid a labeled drive to the clerk. Move to admit Exhibit K under seal. The recording is time-stamped and voices can be verified. The judge held out her hand, took it, set it up. On the black monitor, our reflections hovered. Me, them, the brother who had chosen truth over blood. "If this is what you claim," the judge said to me, "the urgency is clear. If it isn't," she let the silence finish the sentence. My phone buzzed again. Another message from him. "They don't know about the second part. Don't flinch." I didn't. The judge nodded to the clerk. "Play it." The speakers crackled. The first syllable formed, and the bailiff stepped forward as a deputy entered through the side door, carrying a sealed envelope addressed to the court. My heart knew the handwriting before my eyes did. The judge slid it open, scanned the first line, and looked at me. Sharp, knowing. "Ms. Leipzig," she said, gavel in hand. "Do you know what this is?" "Yes, Your Honor." My voice didn't shake. "It's the piece that ends their marriage." Before everything unraveled, my life looked like the kind people pause to admire. The way you'd pause in front of a perfectly staged window display. Catherine Leipzig, 35, co-owner of a thriving interior design firm, married to a man who could make strangers laugh within 30 seconds of meeting them, best friends since childhood with the woman everyone else described as a force of nature. We lived in a restored Craftsman in Pasadena, polished hardwoods, big kitchen island, light flooding the breakfast nook every morning. Saturday mornings were our ritual. He'd grind coffee beans by hand, humming something half-forgotten from the 80s, while I flipped through design magazines with my bare feet on the warm floor. My best friend Layla would often show up mid-morning, hair still wet from a spin class, chattering about whatever new chaos her dating life had thrown at her. She'd sit on the counter, sipping from my mug as if it belonged to her. I used to think that meant comfort, familiarity, family. We'd been a trio for years, me, him, and Layla, going back to when we were all still figuring ourselves out. I met her first in a college drawing class. She had a way of making herself the sun in any room, and I'd been drawn to her orbit without hesitation. He came later, at a mutual friend's party. She introduced us with a teasing, "Don't get too comfortable. He's allergic to commitment." He wasn't. Not with me. We built our life in layers. First the apartment with the peeling bathroom tile, then the fixer-upper that turned into a 2-year renovation project, then finally the business I started with a partner who knew more about finance than fabric. Layla was there through it all, painting walls, celebrating milestones, even throwing me a surprise 30th birthday party where she made a toast that had me in tears. Looking back, I can't decide if that speech was genuine or a perfect rehearsal for what came later. My husband, Mark, was the type who could walk into a room full of strangers and walk out with 3 new friends and a job offer. People loved him. That charm was part of what I fell for, but it came with an undercurrent I used to ignore. The way he could make someone feel like the most important person in the room while quietly calculating what they might be useful for later. It wasn't malicious, not exactly. Just opportunistic. He'd tell a story one way to one person, another way to someone else, smoothing the edges so it fit the audience. I told myself it was adaptability. Layla, on the other hand, had no edges to smooth. She was all sharp angles and full-volume confidence, but she had a knack for wrapping it in self-deprecating humor. She'd drop outrageous stories about her latest disasters, laughing so hard she made you laugh, too. She'd brag about being selectively loyal, which I thought was just her way of saying she kept her circle small. I didn't realize then how much weight the selectively carried. In those days, my calendar was split between client meetings, site visits, and evenings with Mark. Layla would join us for dinners or weekend hikes. Sometimes she'd call me in the middle of a Tuesday to ask if I wanted to duck out for an early happy hour, just to reset the week. She knew everything about our life, our finances, our fights, the things I wanted to change but didn't know how. And I knew hers, or thought I did. Business was going well enough that Mark and I started talking about buying a vacation property, a cabin up north maybe, somewhere to get away from the constant hum of work. He was unusually enthusiastic about it, pulling up listings over breakfast, running numbers. It felt like momentum, like we were building towards something even bigger. Layla was thrilled for us. Or at least, she said she was. She asked endless questions about the cabin. Would we rent it out? Who'd handle the bookings? Would we invite friends up on weekends? She joked about being our permanent guest. I remember laughing, telling her she'd have to work for her keep by cooking dinner. One night, the three of us were at a wine bar downtown. Mark was telling some story about a deal at work, the kind where he came out looking like the smartest man in the room. Layla laughed in all the right places, leaning in just a little too far. When she excused herself to take a call, Mark watched her walk away. Not in an obvious, lustful way, more like a thoughtful appraisal. The kind you might give a painting you hadn't noticed before but suddenly realized was valuable. I noticed, and I told myself I was imagining it. Red flags are like that in the beginning. They're not waving, they're barely stirring. Easy to ignore when the rest of the picture looks perfect. That same month, Layla's brother, Daniel, moved back to the area after years overseas. I'd met him a handful of times, quiet, polite, almost the opposite of his sister. Layla brought him to one of our Sunday dinners. Mark liked him instantly, even made a crack about how Daniel was too serious for his own good. I didn't think much of it at the time. Then came the night I now know was the start of the end. Mark had been out late for what he called a networking dinner. I was in bed with a book when Layla texted, "Hey, you up?" She wanted to drop by, said she needed to talk. It was nearly 11, but we'd had late-night talks before, so I said sure. She arrived flushed, buzzing with some mix of excitement and nerves. She poured herself a glass of wine without asking, pacing my kitchen. "You ever feel like life's too short not to take what you want?" she asked, half laughing. I remember frowning. "What's that supposed to mean?" She waved it off. "Nothing. Just, I've been thinking a lot about what's actually mine. What I've earned. People don't just hand you what you deserve. You have to take it." I didn't know if she was talking about her job, her dating life, or something else entirely. Before I could press, she drained the wine, hugged me tight, and left. Mark came home 20 minutes later, smelling faintly of her perfume. I remember the exact sound my life made when it cracked. It wasn't shouting or breaking glass. It was the soft ping of the front door camera at 12:38 a.m., the polite little chime that meant someone had just stepped onto my porch. I was in bed, half asleep, when the notification lit up my phone. I tapped the live feed and froze. Layla stood there, hood up, glancing over her shoulder, before looking straight into the camera like she knew exactly where it was. A few seconds later, the lock clicked from the inside. Mark. He opened the door without a word, and the two of them slipped inside like they owned the place. No lights. No sound except the faint click of the door shutting. My chest tightened, but I didn't move. I watched them pass the hallway camera. Shapes moving past the photos of our vacations, our wedding, the life we'd built. In the den, the camera caught their faces. He put his hands on her waist. She tilted her head back and smiled. Then he kissed her. Shock hit like a clean blade. No thoughts, just the weight of seeing it. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. I forced myself up, each step toward the den deliberate. I wanted to see it with my own eyes. The door was cracked. I heard them talking in low voices, my name slipping in and out of sentences. Words like timing, Monday, and transfer made my stomach twist. They weren't just together. They were planning something. I pushed the door open. They jerked apart. She stepped back, protecting her wine glass. He kept his hand on her waist a beat too long. "Hey," Mark said, like I'd interrupted a casual chat. Layla gave a mock-surprised smile. "Kathy, don't," I said. We stared at each other, the air thick with something I couldn't name yet. I asked, "How long?" Mark glanced at her before answering. "It's complicated." "It's not," I said. Layla's tone turned falsely gentle. "We didn't plan to tell you like this, but how were you going to tell me?" I cut in. "A brunch invite? A caption on Instagram? She frowned. You don't have to be cruel. I laughed. Short, sharp. This is me being polite. Mark raised his hands in that calming gesture I'd seen him use to shut down arguments. Let's not turn this into a scene. We were going to talk when it wasn't so heated. You're in my house after midnight, I said. That's heated. Layla met my eyes. This isn't just a fling. We're in love. There it was. The insult layered over the betrayal. She said it like it was noble. Like love excused the theft. I kept my voice steady. How long? Mark exhaled. Since spring. Spring. Since the cabin listings at breakfast. Since Layla started asking endless questions about guest rooms. I'd been building a future. They'd been hollowing it out. None of this was meant to hurt you, she added. It was meant to take what you wanted, I said. He tried a softer tone. Catherine, you and I have been off for a while. You've been married to the business. I need someone who's fun, impressed, convenient, I asked. He sighed. We didn't decide this overnight. It developed. Like mold, I said. Layla rolled her eyes. This is why we wanted to do it gently. You make everything into drama. You're in my house with my husband, I said flatly. Drama arrived with you. For a moment, no one spoke. Then my eyes dropped to her wrist, lipstick smudged where it shouldn't be. Behind them, on the console, Mark's laptop sat open. One tab showed our bank account. Another, a corporate registry site. The trust name in the form field used her maiden name. I stepped past them and read the screen. You created a trust? Mark moved to close the laptop, but I stopped him with a hand on the lid. We've been doing some planning, he said carefully. I scrolled. Shell companies, wire forms. An appointment marked noon, finalize. Monday. It wasn't an accident. It was a plan. My grief sharpened into anger. Get out, I said. Both of you. This is my house too, he said. 80-20 until year 5, I replied. Clause 12C of the prenup, the one you signed because you were not that guy. Layla groaned. God, you and your paperwork. Because paperwork is real when people aren't, I said. They left without slamming the door. At the threshold, she gave me a pitying smile. You'll understand someday. When you find what you really want. I shut the door before I could answer. The house felt wrong, as if the walls themselves had seen too much. I stood in the den, staring at the glowing laptop. My chest ached, but under it was something colder and more useful. I opened the laptop again. Took photos of the bank pages, the registry, the calendar. I forwarded them to my private email. Then I checked his phone, left casually on the console. One recent voicemail caught my eye. I pressed play. Layla's voice, casual and smug. Hey baby, I'm downstairs. Also, we're still good for Monday, noon. He'll never make the connection. He'll never make the connection. He, not she. Daniel. The name landed like a puzzle piece snapping into place. Layla's brother. The quiet one. The one who'd moved back months ago. He knew things about her no one else did. And now I realized he might know this. I dialed his number before I could overthink it. Catherine. His voice was warm with sleep. I'm sorry to call so late, I said. But they're together, and they're moving money on Monday. Silence. Then, calm and certain. I'm coming over. 20 minutes later, he was at my door in a hoodie, his face set. He took in the laptop, the open tabs, my posture like a vase wired back together. I'm sorry, he said. I nodded. I think they've been planning this for months. He stepped closer. Can I? He asked, gesturing to the laptop. I pushed it toward him. He scanned the registry, the trust name, the calendar entry. His jaw tightened. This wasn't a mistake, he said. I know. He looked at me. Do you want me involved? Yes, I said without hesitation. We sat at the dining table with coffee and a notebook. I laid out everything. Dates, odd remarks, the sudden secrecy. Daniel added details I'd missed. Layla's habit of going grand when she lied, her thrill in bending rules just to prove she could. Monday at noon, he said, tapping the page. They think that's their safety net. They think they're the smartest people in the room, I said. At 4 a.m., he slid his phone toward me. She left a spare at my place months ago. It synced to the cloud. I never looked. Until now. Inside was a note titled, Things to Do Before Monday. It read like a checklist. Finalize the trust. Confirm the wire. Make sure Kay doesn't find out until after. Too emotional. Too emotional. I sat back, steady now. If they had a plan, I'd build a better one. If they wanted to strip me quietly, I'd end them loudly. Make the revenge fit the crime. I turned to a fresh page in the notebook and wrote 3 words. Clause 12C. Then I looked at Daniel. We're going to end this. By the time the sun started bleeding through the blinds, I'd stopped shaking. Grief was still there, low and constant, but it had shifted into something sharper, cleaner. I wasn't thinking about whether I could survive this. I was thinking about how they wouldn't. Daniel sat across from me at the dining table, his coffee going cold between his hands. Neither of us had slept. The notebook in front of us looked like the aftermath of a storm. Names circled, arrows drawn, notes in the margins. They think Monday is their finish line, he said. They have no idea they've already crossed it. I nodded. They think I'm too emotional to notice, too reasonable to retaliate. I almost smiled. That's how you lose a game before it starts, by underestimating the person across the table. The truth was, they'd built their entire plan on the idea that I would crumble quietly. Mark always counted on my silence to smooth his ambitions. Layla counted on my loyalty to shield her from consequences. Neither of them had ever seen what I could do when I stopped protecting them. You're sure you want to go through with this? Daniel asked. Yes. My voice was steady. I'm not walking away with a moral victory. I want them to feel it. Money, reputation, security. I want the ground under them to vanish. Daniel leaned back, watching me like he was memorizing this version of me for the first time. All right. Then we start now. I thought of the look on Mark's face when I mentioned Clause 12C, the split-second flicker of doubt before he smoothed it over. He'd read the prenup carefully enough to find loopholes, but not carefully enough to realize it could be used as a weapon if he triggered the wrong clause. Layla, on the other hand, wouldn't even remember what was in it. Paperwork bored her. She didn't know it could ruin her. That was the difference between them and me. They were playing checkers. I'd been playing chess for years. We reviewed what we had. The synced phone from Layla's apartment with her notes and messages. The bank records and registry screenshots. The voicemail that put Daniel in the loop as a cooperating witness. This alone could take them down, Daniel said, tapping the page. It's not enough, I replied. I don't want to just stop them. I want to time it so the impact hits when they're least able to recover. They're finalizing Monday at noon, he said. Exactly, which means everything we do between now and then has to look like nothing at all. That was the key. They couldn't know I'd switched from heartbroken to calculating. They had to believe they were still safe. Layla thrived on the arrogance of thinking she'd gotten away with something. Mark thrived on controlling the narrative. I'd let them have both, right up until the moment the floor dropped. I could almost hear Layla telling someone, Kathy's been quiet. I think she's finally accepted it. The thought made me want to laugh. We worked in silence for a few minutes. Then Daniel said, You know they're going to watch you. I'm counting on it, I said. If they saw me upset, it would confirm their script. I was fragile, licking my wounds. If they saw me angry, it might spook them. But if they saw nothing, no fight, no resistance, they'd relax. And that's when people make mistakes. By mid-morning, I knew what I was going to do. Not in the vague, I'll get back at them someday way, but with the clarity of someone already mapping the first move. Step 1 would be simple. Keep Monday intact. Let them go through with the transfer. The prenup clause was clear. Attempted concealment of marital property triggered immediate forfeiture of his equity in shared real estate and his claim to my business valuation. If I acted too soon, they'd reroute. But if I waited until the wire was confirmed, the law would do the heavy lifting. Step 2. Make it public. They wanted this betrayal to stay between us so they could control the story. I'd make sure it unfolded in front of the one audience they couldn't charm, people with legal authority and nothing to lose. Daniel studied me over the rim of his mug. "You're scaring me a little," he said. "You haven't seen anything yet," I replied. We finalized the chain of evidence. Screenshots labeled, timestamps verified, the original files from Layla's synced phone copied to 2 separate drives. Daniel would keep one, I'd keep the other. If they suspected him, they'd assume he was just a bitter brother. They'd never guess he and I were working in lockstep. Before he left, Daniel paused in the doorway. "They're going to regret underestimating you." "They already do," I said. Once he was gone, I stood in the center of the kitchen, looking around at the space they'd walked through like it was theirs. I pictured the smug look on Layla's face when she told me I'd understand someday. I pictured Mark's half-smile when he thought he was being reasonable. I let those images burn themselves into me. They weren't just memories, they were fuel. I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I sat down at my desk, pulled up my calendar, and started marking times. Calls to make, documents to pull, quiet little steps that wouldn't mean anything to them until it was too late. By the time I closed my laptop, the plan wasn't just forming. It had already started. Mark and Layla thought they'd taken the first move. They didn't realize I'd been playing the long game since the moment I saw them on that camera feed, and by the time they figured it out, the only thing left for them to do would be watch it happen. The first rule of revenge is patience. Not the slow burn kind where you nurse a grudge forever, but the razor-sharp kind where every day between discovery and execution is deliberate. By Monday, I had 48 hours. Every move I made had to look harmless, routine even, so they wouldn't suspect that their perfect little plan had a crack running straight through it. The first step was legal positioning. I called my attorney, Melissa, under the pretense of updating her on some changes in my marriage. On speakerphone, I kept my tone soft, resigned, the way Mark would expect if he somehow heard about it. I fed her just enough details to make her lean forward in her chair. The prenup clause, the bank transfer scheduled for noon, the corporate registry entry in Layla's maiden name. I need to know exactly what happens if he tries to move those assets before we're legally separated, I said. Melissa's voice was crisp. If you have proof of intent and execution, Clause 12C activates immediately. It won't just strip his claim. It voids any profit from concealed transfers and opens him up for damages. Exactly what I needed. But proof wasn't enough. Timing was everything. The second step was evidence security. Daniel came over that night with the spare phone he'd pulled from Layla's apartment, and we spent hours cataloging everything. Every text, photo, and voice memo got a timestamp and a duplicate stored on 2 encrypted drives. One in my safe, one in his apartment. If they suspected him, they'd assume family loyalty was frayed. Not that he and I were allies. At one point, while scrolling through Layla's messages, Daniel froze. "You need to see this," he said, handing me the phone. It was a text from Mark to Layla. "Noon Monday. Meet me after. Bring champagne." They weren't just planning to move the money, they were planning to celebrate. That fueled step 3, controlled information leaks. I made 2 accidental social media moves, liking an old photo of Mark and me at a gala and posting a story about my quiet weekend at home with coffee and work. It was bait for Layla, who prided herself on reading between my lines. I wanted her to think I was retreating into myself, exactly as they'd predicted. Close call number 1 happened Sunday morning. Mark dropped by unannounced, claiming he'd forgotten some documents in the home office. I let him in, feigning mild awkwardness but nothing close to hostility. He wandered the house like he was checking to see if I'd changed anything. When he stepped toward my desk, I moved smoothly into his path. "Messy in there," I said lightly. Client files everywhere. He smirked. Still organized chaos? Still mine, I said. He left with his papers. If he'd looked a little closer, he would have found the drive hidden behind a row of books in the cabinet. Step 4 was lining up allies who didn't know they were allies. I arranged a chance lunch with a mutual friend of ours, Rachel, who worked in the accounting department of the bank where Mark kept his business account. I didn't ask for anything outright. That would have been reckless. Instead, I let her talk about her week until she mentioned that Monday was going to be hectic for her team. Quarterly audit kickoff, she said. Perfect. If the bank was already on high alert, any suspicious movement of funds would get noticed faster. Sunday night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, rehearsing the sequence. Let them finalize the transfer, call Melissa with the confirmation, file the injunction immediately, and move to freeze all related accounts before they could hide the trail. The last piece of the plan came from Daniel. They're meeting at the Palisade after the transfer, he said, sliding his phone across the table to show me the message. Private table. She loves that place. That detail lit a fuse in my mind. The Palisade was one of the busiest upscale restaurants in Pasadena at lunch. Lawyers, business owners, and half the city council frequented it. If they wanted privacy, they'd picked the wrong place. We adjusted the plan. I'd let them celebrate, and I'd time the call to Melissa so the news would reach them before dessert. Public humiliation to go with legal ruin. Close call number 2 came Monday morning. At 8:15, Layla texted me, "Thinking of you today. Hope you're okay." I stared at the screen, fighting the urge to type exactly what I thought. Instead, I replied, "Trying to be. Thanks." If she read it as fragile, good. If she read it as sincere, even better. By 9:30, I'd showered, dressed in neutral tones, and packed my bag with everything I'd need, both drives, printed copies of the evidence, and my signed affidavit detailing the timeline. At 10:00, Daniel texted from across town, "She's on her way to meet him. Look smug." At 11:15, I positioned myself in my attorney's office, a block from the courthouse. Melissa reviewed the affidavit while her assistant stood ready to file the emergency motion. All we needed was the trigger, the confirmed transfer. At 11:57, Daniel sent the message, "Wire in process." At 12:03, the bank's online portal showed the transfer complete. Melissa didn't even look up as she handed the packet to her assistant. "Go." The assistant disappeared toward the courthouse, heels sharp against the marble floor. My pulse slowed. The plan was now in motion, unstoppable. At 12:12, Daniel's final text came in. "They're sitting at the table. She just ordered champagne." I pictured them there, Mark in his tailored suit, Layla leaning in with that conspiratorial smile she used when she thought she'd won, the server popping the cork, the first sip. And then, minutes later, Mark's phone lighting up with a call from his attorney telling him that every account tied to that transfer was frozen. The prenup clause had been triggered, and his equity was gone. By 12:25, Melissa's phone buzzed with confirmation from the judge. Motion granted, accounts frozen, hearing scheduled within 48 hours. She looked at me, a slow smile forming. "They're finished," she said. The rest was just timing. I left her office and walked past the Palisade, catching sight of them through the front window. Layla was laughing, head tipped back, champagne flute in hand. Mark was mid-sentence, gesturing like a man telling a victory story. Neither had any idea that the story had just ended. I didn't go in. I didn't need to. I just kept walking, the city moving around me like nothing had happened. But in my pocket, my phone buzzed. Daniel again. He just checked his phone. Face changed. "She's asking what's wrong." I slipped the phone back without replying. The plan was done. The trap had sprung. They had no idea that the real damage wasn't just the money. It was the fact that I'd been in control from the moment I saw them on that camera feed. They'd underestimated me, and I'd built my revenge in plain sight. By the time they figured it out, it was already over. By the time the clock hit 12:30, the legal machinery was already chewing through everything they'd built together. The asset freeze was in place, the prenup clause triggered, and the court date locked. But I wasn't finished. Legal consequences were only half the point. The other half was making sure they couldn't hide from what they'd done. Melissa had been careful with her filings, public enough to become part of the record, sealed just enough to keep the wrong people from tampering with it before the hearing. She didn't need to know that I had no intention of keeping this quiet. Step 1. Force the truth into daylight. I'd arranged for an anonymous tip to a local business columnist I knew from a charity gala years back. The kind of man who thrived on whispered scandals about people who thought they were untouchable. The tip was short and irresistible. Prominent Pasadena couple caught in high-stakes marital asset concealment scheme. Court filing today. Public record. By the time Mark and Layla finished their champagne, his phone would be blowing up. Not just with his lawyer's warnings, but with reporters asking for comment. Step 2. Close their escape routes. Daniel had been watching them from across the restaurant, positioned so they never noticed him. At 12:34, he texted, "They're both on their phones now. He looks pale. She's frowning. Good." Mark's accounts were frozen, but I'd gone further. I'd flagged his business credit line with his bank under suspicion of misuse. The audit Rachel had mentioned meant the bank was already primed for scrutiny. By the time he tried to pay for their lunch, his card would decline. And because humiliation works best when witnessed, the Palisades lunchtime crowd was exactly the right stage. Step 3. Make it personal. At 12:38, my phone buzzed. Daniel again. Card declined. Twice. He's arguing with the server. People watching. I imagined the scene. The shift in his voice from smooth to sharp. The way Layla would start touching her hair when she felt the eyes on her. That tightening in her jaw when the attention wasn't flattering. I kept walking, making my way toward the courthouse. At 12:45, the business columnist called. "Catherine," he said, his tone warm with barely contained glee. "Is this tip really from you?" "I have no idea what you mean," I said smoothly. "But if something is on public record, you know I can't stop you from reporting it." By 1 p.m., the online article was live. Headline: Asset Freeze hits local entrepreneur in marital dispute. Possible fraud investigation next. It didn't name Layla, but the phrase unnamed third party might as well have been a neon arrow. Pasadena wasn't a big enough pond for secrets like this to stay submerged. Step 4. Deliver undeniable proof. I'd already prepared a curated package, screenshots of the trust registry, bank transfers, and excerpts from Layla's messages. Nothing that could be traced back to Daniel's phone directly, but enough to make it impossible for them to spin this as misunderstanding. The package went to 3 people: Melissa, my company's board, and, most satisfying of all, the HOA president in Mark's gated community office. I knew that last one would filter through the neighborhood by sundown. At 1:12, Daniel texted, "They left the restaurant. Separate cars. He's driving like hell. She looks pissed." By the time they pulled into their respective driveways, their phones would be buzzing with calls they couldn't answer without admitting what they'd done. Step 5. The personal confrontation. At 2:02, Mark showed up at the house. I opened the door just enough to stand in the frame. "What the hell have you done?" he demanded, voice low, controlled, but with that edge I knew meant panic. "Executed Clause 12C, I said. "You should be familiar with it. You highlighted it." "You've destroyed me," he said, as if it were a fact, not an accusation. "No," I said. "You destroyed yourself. I just filed the paperwork." Layla wasn't with him, which meant they'd already turned on each other. I could imagine the conversation in her car, blame volleying back and forth, her insisting he fix it, him realizing she was as much a liability as a partner. "You'll regret this," he said. I smiled just enough to be insulting. "Not as much as you will." Then I shut the door. Step 6. The final blow. At 4:30, Daniel met me at Melissa's office. He slid a manila envelope across the table. "Found this in her files. She's been keeping records on every deal you've made for the last 3 years. I think she planned to use them against you." Inside were notes in Layla's handwriting, detailing my client list, preferred vendors, even margins on major projects. Enough to suggest corporate espionage if placed in the right hands. Melissa skimmed a few pages and looked up. "Do you want to pursue this?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I thought about Layla's smirk when she told me I'd understand someday, about Mark's certainty that I'd walk away quietly. "Yes," I said. "File it." By 6 p.m., a second motion was in play. This one criminal. If the court agreed she'd obtained my business data unlawfully, she could face charges. At 6:45, Daniel sent one last text for the day. "Her brother just called. She's in hysterics. She thinks you're going to ruin her." I typed back, "She's right." That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on the porch. From the outside, nothing looked different. The street was quiet, the air cooling, the world moving on. But inside the walls of 2 other houses in this city, the walls were closing in. The beauty of the plan wasn't just that it worked, it was that it left them no way back. Mark couldn't unfreeze the accounts without my consent, which he'd never get. Layla couldn't spin her way out of stolen business records without implicating herself further. Their allies would vanish, their reputations collapse, and every conversation they had from this day forward would begin with the same question. What happened? The truth would be everywhere, but they'd still have to live in it. And that was the point. The morning after the execution, Pasadena felt smaller. News traveled faster when it was dressed as scandal, and by sunrise, the whispers had turned into open conversation. The Pasadena Chronicle ran the asset freeze story on the front page. They'd managed to get a blurry photo of Mark leaving the Palisade with his jacket over his shoulder and his tie loose, the caption dripping with implication. By noon, 3 of his biggest clients had postponed upcoming contracts. In his world, that was code for, "We don't want your name attached to ours." Layla wasn't spared. My company's board had reviewed the evidence Melissa submitted on the stolen client data and voted unanimously to pursue charges. It didn't matter that she'd never sold it. Intent was enough to sink her. 2 of her regular freelance clients dropped her before the day was over, citing brand safety. Daniel texted me updates like a war correspondent. Mark's car repossessed from the driveway this morning. Layla's landlord put up an eviction notice. She's a month behind. I didn't feel joy exactly. More equilibrium. The universe briefly had balance. The hearing was 2 days later. Melissa and I walked into the courtroom with our evidence neatly organized, every tab, every page number ready. Mark and Layla sat at the other table, a few feet apart, their body language screaming they'd arrived separately. The judge reviewed the transfer records, the prenup clause, the testimony from Daniel, and the forensic analysis of the synced phone. She didn't need long. Clause 12C is hereby enforced, she ruled. The respondent forfeits all equity in jointly held real estate and relinquishes any claim to the petitioner's business assets. Furthermore, the court finds sufficient preliminary evidence to refer the matter of proprietary data theft to the district attorney's office. Mark's lawyer leaned in, whispering furiously. Layla stared straight ahead, face flushed. When the gavel came down, it was more than a legal ruling. It was the sound of their scaffolding collapsing. Outside the courthouse, a small crowd had gathered. Neighbors, curious onlookers, maybe a few people who'd been on the receiving end of their arrogance over the years. A reporter called out, "Catherine, any comment on today's ruling?" I paused just long enough to let the cameras focus. "Actions have consequences," I said, then kept walking. For the next week, I stayed quiet. Not out of mercy, out of discipline. They needed to feel the silence, to wonder what I might still be holding back. By the end of the month, Mark had moved into a furnished apartment in a less glamorous zip code. His car was gone. His company's website quietly listed him as on indefinite leave. Layla was harder to track, but word got back to me through Daniel. She was staying with a friend across town, jobless and avoiding social media. Her once loud online presence had gone dark except for a single post, a black square captioned, "Sometimes the people you trust the most." She'd turned off the comments. It would have been enough to leave it there. But enough had never been the goal. The final move came on a Friday night, almost a month after the hearing. Daniel showed up at my door with a flash drive and a look I recognized, the look of someone holding a match over gasoline. "She forgot to unsync the phone," he said. "You need to see this." On the drive was a video, grainy security footage from the Palisades valet lot on the day of the transfer. It showed Mark and Layla walking to her car after lunch, both clearly agitated. They stopped halfway, arguing. Mark gestured toward the restaurant, phone in hand. Layla shoved him. Not hard enough to hurt, but enough to make him stumble. And then she said it. Clear as day, caught on the valet's audio feed. "You were supposed to move it to my account, not yours." That sentence in her voice was a confession and a knife in Mark's back. Melissa's eyes lit up when I played it for her the next morning. "This isn't just evidence of conspiracy. It's evidence of intent to defraud each other," she said. "We can amend the filings. It'll void any claim she has to the funds, even if they unfreeze later." By Monday, the video was part of the court record. The media got hold of it within hours. The clip went viral, not because of the legal implications, but because of the sheer audacity of two people who had betrayed someone else and still managed to betray each other. The fallout was immediate. Layla's pending charges gained traction with the DA. Mark's lawyer withdrew from his case. Their names became shorthand in local gossip for greed gone wrong. A week later, I ran into Mark at the grocery store. He looked smaller somehow, not just thinner, but reduced. He opened his mouth like he might say something, then closed it again. I walked past without breaking stride. The real twist came later that night. Daniel called. "I think you should know. She's leaving town. Said she can't show her face here again. But she's not going alone." My stomach tightened. "Who?" "Your husband," he said. "Or ex-husband, I guess. They're leaving together. Only," he hesitated, "not in the way you think." It turned out the frozen funds had been released pending trial, but only to an escrow account neither of them could access without the other's signature. The judge had ordered them to work together to untangle the mess. They'd decided to take what was left and run, convinced they could start fresh somewhere no one knew them. But Daniel had seen the withdrawal paperwork. Layla had arranged it so the full balance would go to a new account in her name only. No joint control. No split. Mark didn't know yet. Somewhere out there, in whatever hotel lobby or rental car lot they'd chosen for their escape, he'd learn the truth. That after everything, after losing me, his home, and his business, the one person he thought he still had just taken the last thing he owned. And when that moment came, I wouldn't need to lift a finger. The best revenge isn't just watching them lose. It's letting them destroy each other with the same precision they once tried to destroy you. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story. If it struck a chord with you, or if you've ever faced a betrayal that changed everything, I'd love to hear your thoughts or experiences in the comments below. Your stories matter, and sharing them might just help someone else going through the same thing. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more powerful, true-to-life stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. And of course, give this video a like. It really helps support the channel and our community.